From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
At times, the U.S. House chamber sounded more like the British Parliament during Tuesday night's State of the Union.
Contact my office. I'll give you a copy.
Republicans voicing their displeasure with much of President Joe Biden's speech as he addressed a divided Congress and U.S. House now under Republican control. What's the outlook on Capitol Hill for the next 2 years? And should President Biden run again? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi, U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Welcome back to the program. Last time we had you on, it was via Zoom. So it's nice to have you in person.
In 3D.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Look, so I want to start there. You've been to more than a dozen State of the Union addresses throughout your tenure as a U.S. Senator. We know how it felt on TV. Did it feel different in the room?
It did. It felt raucous. And, I have a lot of affection for Joe Biden. We've known each other a long time. He's come to Rhode Island for me. He was the guy who said, "You want to be on the Supreme Court?" We got a history. And so he's going into this thing, and there was also, along with the raucousness, a little bit of anxiety of like, how's he going to do? Wishing him well. And as it turned out, we didn't need to worry. He did really well.
You were worried about how he would do in the moment?
Yeah.
Were you anticipating something like that?
Yes. Okay. I mean, come on. Speaker McCarthy tells these MAGA extremists to be on their best behavior. What we saw was their best behavior. It's not very good.
So is that what we can expect moving forward for each State of the Union? It is, as I joked in the open, a British Parliament feel. If a Republican president is now giving a State of the Union, are Democrats going to feel empowered or going to?
I think the fringe of bad behavior is pretty much entirely on the Republican side right now. I don't frankly see that changing. Are there ways in which a Republican president could bait Democrats into, objecting loudly? I suppose, but this was a first.
How much does it really matter? I mean, Washington is so partisan right now. We saw January 6th 2 years ago, and yet all these bipartisan bills did pass last session Congress. Things like that, like the Inflation Reduction Act, things people didn't think would happen.
Well, that wasn't bipartisan,
right? But you know what I mean.
The infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, the marriage bill.
Yeah. So I mean, is it just kind of theater, and then behind the scenes, all of you say, "Well, we had some fun in the TV cameras, but now we'll legislate"?
No, it's more like separate lanes. There's the, this is the partisan warfare lane, and then the, we can still work together here lane. And they exist side by side, but there's not a whole lot of fakery about which lane you're in.
Oh, I see. So you're saying some people are in one lane and some people in the other lane.
Yeah, and some issues are in one lane and some issues are in the other lane. I mean, there are issues where we can work together with Republicans very easily, and then there are other ones where Fox News, the base, all the kind of red meat stuff means it's really hard to find somebody to work on that issue.
Yeah, well, some of the red meat stuff which came up in the State of the Union, and I know Ted's going to ask you about, Social Security and all that, but it dovetails is the debt ceiling. And why is it unreasonable, Senator, that Republicans want to discuss future spending when negotiating raising of the debt ceiling? Because I got to tell you, it does not sound all that unreasonable to the people at home.
What's unreasonable about it is the fact that they are threatening a potentially catastrophic economic trigger, and they're unwilling to put their plan forward. That's a very, very bad combination.
They'll say the president is threatening that by not sitting down at the table and negotiating and talking about future spending, that he's the one that's
which takes you back to the part that they have not announced what it is that they want. What they, I think, want to do is to force their way into a back room with the president with the hand grenade of blowing up the economy because of the debt limit in the room with them, and force him to agree to the Social Security and Medicare cuts they want, and get bipartisan cover by coming out and announcing it and say, we've agreed with the president to cut Social Security and Medicare. And of course, he's going to do no such thing. And I thought he did a great job in the speech in smoking them out on that so that they blew up their own position. I mean, it's really hard to go back now and say, we want to cut Social Security and Medicare after they're demonstration on the floor.
Well, and Democrats were
them.
gleeful at that call and response the president had with the Republicans, where
it was
they
very good,
cheered for
and consequential. Usually
seemingly
it's just noise in a State of the
We'll
Union.
see. We'll see.
But this, I think, locked them into having to back off on their Social Security and Medicare plans.
But let me ask you, we're going to talk more about this. You are now a chairman for the first time in your Senate, a full chairman of the Budget Committee. So you're thinking about the whole federal budget a lot now, even more than you did before. Social Security and the health insurance programs, they're nearly half the federal budget. Is there, as much as Democrats like that they could box the Republicans in on these programs, how can the country get to a more sustainable fiscal path without ever touching those programs?
Two things, and I'm going to try to do both in the Budget Committee. One, we got to fix the Budget Committee process so that it actually takes healthcare spending into account. It doesn't. It doesn't even do the arithmetic of budgeting correctly. It doesn't count revenues and revenue changes. It doesn't count healthcare spending. It's just appropriated spending. So it's a nonsense arithmetical formula to begin with. And then the second thing is that we can do a lot to lower healthcare cost. Rhode Island has really led the way in many respects with the two big Rhode Island accountable care organizations, Integra and Coastal Medical, which were like winners nationally. They were best in show nationally. So Al Perini and Al Kuros, well done. They were the ones who launched it. And I show a graph all the time in the Budget Committee that shows we're like $7 trillion over 10 years lower than anticipated costs. And we're going to focus CBO, the Congressional Budget Office's attention on looking into that and seeing what we can do more of to get $7 trillion more in savings by doing the things that we did in Rhode Island that patients love, that make care better and more efficient, keep people out of the hospital and reduce costs the way you should, rather than by saying, oh, that's a benefit you can't have any longer. That won't happen.
So I want to talk more about the Budget Committee. And for the people at home, I'm going to try to keep everyone not asleep talking about the Budget Committee. So
no offense.
Yeah, no offense to the viewers. This is
Don't worry.
Yeah, he
the
understands.
Budget Committee has given you plenty of cause to fall asleep
Right,
over
exactly.
the years.
So the Budget Committee, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My sense of the history is in the 70s, Congress said, the budget situation's a mess like the way we do it. Let's create a committee specifically to have an overarching view and kind of hold the appropriators to something so we know where the budget's going. But ever since, there's been a lot of tension. The appropriators would rather just do it themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fast forward, you've been very critical of this committee you now lead. You've called it, quote, preposterous and meaningless. You called it a nullity at one point. You even said, we don't do anything in this committee.
That does not age well.
So
that's going to change, by the way.
So what, all right, you were your fellow Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed is on appropriations. Jack Reed likes when he pops out of those negotiations with some number they came up with and the projects he wants to fund and everything. Why is Jack Reed going to say, all right, Sheldon Whitehouse, you get to decide now, how far we can go?
That's not the arena of dispute. The arena of dispute is going to be to make the budget calculation meaningful. And at the moment, it doesn't, as I said, consider healthcare expense, which is a huge part of the budget. It doesn't consider tax spending. So when Donald Trump gave away $2 trillion to his big donors and big corporations, didn't show up in the budget calculation. Makes no sense. And we don't really have an organized target. Pretty much everybody in this world agrees that the debt to gross domestic product ratio is the right thing to be targeting, but we don't target that. That's not in our rules. So I'm going to continue to try to make the Budget Committee mathematically relevant to the budget so people will listen because we're actually dealing with real numbers at that point. And the second thing you can do in the Budget Committee is bring attention to looming budget problems. So you're going to see a whole barrage of hearings on what climate change is going to do to the federal budget if we don't get ahead of it. And we're opening with very significant witnesses. We're going to go on for several hearings. And by focusing on these huge budget impacts that are looming, we can head them off. And I think in those two ways, the Budget Committee can be relevant and can be useful. And I hope it's going to become the members' surprise favorite committee.
We'll see. I want to shift gears here. Look, Senator, President Biden chided former President Trump's handling of classified documents as, quote, irresponsible. On this issue, this narrow issue, is the president a hypocrite?
I don't like to use names. Obviously, we have a sloppy process with dealing with classified documents.
So now it's about the
that
process, but before with Trump, it was about him, right?
I don't know that I've said anything inconsistent, but
Okay.
I'm sure you'll find it if I have. But I think that with President Trump, what was objectionable there was not just that he left with a bunch of classified documents, but that when he was caught, he started lying about it. And he got people to file false statements, which is a federal offense, with the archivists and the FBI saying, I've looked and it's all there. And at the same time, they had sources that were saying, no, it's not. There's still stuff. And they got a search warrant from a federal judge based on evidence that it was still there so they could go look. And sure enough, when they went to look, there it all was.
Right.
So I think it's been the obstruction and the lies that have gotten President Trump in trouble more than just the documents problem.
And the Biden administration will say, you didn't need a subpoena, Department of Justice, because I opened the front door.
We opened the door. Everything you want. Come on in. Have it all.
But look, leaders of the Senate.
And those are legally different things,
of
although
course.
they relate, it's different than the documents problem.
The leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee, you have Chairman Mark Warner and Vice Chair Marco Rubio. They've been in lockstep on this issue. They've expressed real displeasure at the Department of Justice for what they view as foot dragging and getting briefed on what is actually going on. And so people understand those briefs, they have them behind closed doors, they're not on TV, so they can get an understanding. Is the administration foot dragging on this issue? Do you agree with that?
I'm not close enough to it to tell whether they're foot dragging, and I'm not on the Intelligence Committee any longer, so I haven't seen what the asks have been.
I think Senator Reid is ex officio on that.
He is ex officio.
Yeah.
So there is a difference here from the ordinary course, and that is that, and I say this as a former United States attorney, once the Department of Justice has embarked on a criminal investigation, they do not want other folks butting in. They don't want intelligence officials butting in. It is not their business. To the extent there's an intelligence overlay, they have to disclose stuff, and they are to our intelligence officials. And they particularly don't want members of Congress butting in. The last thing a federal prosecutor wants is a member of Congress having a look into an ongoing case. Period, end of story, irrespective of the circumstances.
But public interest often in that balancing test outweighs what the interest you're expressing.
You've been covering law enforcement for a long time. I'd love you to think of an example when the Department of Justice gave up information about an ongoing criminal investigation because of public
I can
interest.
think about an email of the Hillary Clinton disclosure going into the presidential.
Oh, there was the Comey thing.
Yes.
But that was he was roundly criticized for that.
Sure,
that violated policy. That was wrong. So that's something that was done that was wrong. It's not a good example of where the line should be.
Briefly, because I want to move on, but you served for quite a few years in the Intelligence Committee, if I remember, right? And earlier, one thing some people have said, they've said, all right, now that it's both parties have a problem here, maybe we can stop yelling at each other for a second, say, part of the problem is just over-classifying, like stamping too many things top secret. Do you
two thumbs up?
Do you agree? So you agree that too many federal documents are getting stamped as classified, et cetera?
And there's an enormous motive to do that in the federal government, because if you are a federal official, as soon as you stamp something classified, it dramatically inhibits Congress's ability to do oversight, and particularly to make public what you found through oversight. And where I raged about this was when we were looking at the torture program that the CIA was running, and Dick Cheney was declassifying information about that program selectively, leading to very false impressions in the public mind about it and false arguments that I could debunk in a minute, except that I couldn't disclose the information that debunked what he was saying.
You would hear
I'm
things,
not a declassifier.
You would hear things in the secret intelligence briefings, but then you'd come out to the cameras, you wouldn't be allowed to say what you had heard about.
And Cheney was saying the opposite, and I couldn't blow up his false narrative, because then the FBI would come knocking on my door and saying, you didn't have permission to release that. The executive branch has permission to declassify following proper procedures. The process for the Congress to declassify is so complicated it has never successfully been done.
All right, they've been telling me we have to go to a break, so we're overdue. But just 30 seconds on this. Biggest news of the year, of course, is you became a grandfather.
Yes.
A month ago, so did Governor McKee, do you have
Yes.
any advice for him as a grandpa?
Lots of hugging.
You mean with the baby, I assume.
and be ready to hand the baby off at the appropriate times.
Which means a diaper change, Senator? Is that what that
Could
means?
be.
All right.
Could be.
We're going to take a break here on Newsmakers. Our guest is U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. We'll see you when we come back. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator, you returned from a trip to Ukraine with Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and fellow Democrat Richard Blumenthal. I watched the entire news conference when you returned on C-SPAN. We should note that that news conference was held before the U.S. decided to send M1 Abrams tanks over to Ukraine, which I want to ask you about in a second. But in that news conference, you were talking about converting funds from Russian oligarchs, something you have made a cornerstone of your efforts with the war in Ukraine. And you said that money should be used for reparations in Ukraine. And that suggests to me you have a high confidence that they're actually going to win this thing, Ukraine, against Russia. If you're talking about reparations and using the money for reparations, unless I'm misinterpreting what you said in your news conference, that's victory for Ukraine? Is that how you view it?
That is how I view it. I think not only is victory for Ukraine the likely outcome, I think victory for Ukraine is the necessary outcome. Because if Putin's ambitions are not finished in Ukraine, he will go on to the Baltics next. He will continue to put pressure on. He will continue to try to degrade other governments. He will continue to try to rebuild the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire or whatever in his madness he thinks he is doing. And it will send a bleak message to Taiwan about whether we're willing to stick with allies when another country tries to, by force of arms, impede their sovereignty, cross their border, and seize their territory.
But how far are you, just Senator Whitehouse, willing to go on that? Pivoting back to the tanks, that was a major escalation by the West in assisting the Ukraine, sending over those tanks. Obviously, it was to nudge Germany in sending over their Leopard tanks, which they gave the green light to do, right? Exactly. But that, look, when this whole thing started, the U.S. was sending over, shoulder-fired missiles and, kind of tiptoeing into their assistance there. What is the line for you on military aid? What is a step too far in assisting them? I mean, they've asked for fighter jets. Would you be willing to send over fighter jets?
I would be willing to have Ukraine have fighter jets, and if it was the considered judgment of our defense authorities that we should be the ones to give it to them, I would support that. But it is also important that the Russians realize that this is a coalition against them. And it's important in that coalition to see that arms are coming from countries other than the United States. So he can't paint this to his people as a proxy war by the United States against Russia, with Ukraine just as the nominal field of battle. So if the French and the UK are willing to give jets to the Ukrainians, and that's a better situation in that context for the US supplying everything, then I would support that. I think the immediate thing that they need are longer range artillery. It's missiles now, but it's like old-fashioned artillery. We gave them the HIMARS. It made a huge difference in the battle space. The ammo depots and the command centers have moved just outside of HIMARS range. And if we were to give the next generation, the next length of reach missiles.
Could that reach go into Russia, though? I mean, should it stop short at the border of Ukraine and Russia, those missiles?
I think the Ukrainians have been very, very deliberate and very appropriate about not targeting Russia, except to, for instance, the air bases where the Russian aircraft were being launched to fire missiles into Ukrainian civilian apartment buildings full of people. I think fair for them to shoot back at those airports where those planes are being launched against them. They have not mounted any kind of an attack on Russian civilian infrastructure, and I think that's a really good line to honor.
I have another foreign policy question for you, but briefly, do you think that we will still be in a shooting war between Ukraine and Russia a year from now, or do you think this will somehow come to a ceasefire this year?
I'm not a defense expert, but from what I heard in Ukraine and from what I'm seeing now, it appears that the Russians are massing for a final huge push that is their make or break moment. And if we can get the tanks and the ATACMS missiles and the hardware that the Ukrainians need to them in time, or just perhaps through their own courage, they can hold that back, and then another counterattack with another big surge like the one that they accomplished earlier into the Crimea, and suddenly you've got a situation where Putin has to sue for peace.
You referenced Taiwan, which of course is about our relations with China, which has been quite in the news the last week because of the big spy balloon.
Yes.
There's been a lot of criticism of how President Biden and Pentagon leaders handled that, letting it drift across the U.S. and then getting to the sea before they shot it down. And some of that has actually come from your fellow Senate Democrats. They got beat up at a hearing yesterday, Tester from Montana, among others. What's your view? Did they act too slowly, or are you comfortable with letting the balloon kind of drift along and then shoot it down?
I think I'm not on armed services, so I don't have the visibility into that they do, so I'm a little hesitant to reach rapid judgments. I do think that what the administration has said, which is that if you want to recover this thing, not being entirely clear what's in it, whether it's powered by, nuclear devices, radioactive stuff, not knowing quite how dangerous it is if it should drop onto American soil, then you do want to drop it into the shallow waters off of the Atlantic coast, where it can be recovered as it was, rather than drop it into deeper and harder waters to salvage from off of Alaska, or risk it landing on somebody's property and somebody gets hurt or killed in all of that. So at least that part of their argument makes sense to me, and in fact proved out.
But what about you were just talking about the messages sent by different foreign policy actions to foreign leaders. The message to China that we all just balloon. Washed it. So to you, as long as we shot it down
after it gathered its intelligence, right?
And we shot it down, and we have it, and they have satellites, and they monitor our coast from just outside the limit, and there's a lot of this going back and forth. I think the balloon was a provocation, and I'm glad we shot it down, but I think it's had more media attention than merited.
Well, because it went over us, we could see it.
Right.
Tim?
On Thursday,
Sputnik 2.0.
Yeah, exactly.
You and 5 other Democratic lawmakers reintroduced the Supreme Court Ethics Recusal and Transparency Act. Democrats have been particularly focused on Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. She is politically active conservative and called on lawmakers and the White House officials to overturn the 2020 presidential elections. It's been in the news a lot. Is that what this bill is all about, really, is targeting Justice Thomas?
No, it's about having a process in the Supreme Court for considering ethics violations. If Rhode Islanders or anybody believe that Jack Reed or I have an ethics problem, you can go to the Senate Ethics Committee. They have a staff. They will look into it. You will get an answer. Over in the House, if you think that David has done something wrong, or Seth has, they've got a House Ethics Committee. They've got an inbox. You put it in. They have a process. Out it comes. You go to any court in the country, and they have a similar process, and you go throughout the executive branch. You've got a concern about Gina Raimondo, they've got an IG, there's the Attorney General. You can get an answer if you believe and allege with any degree of credibility that somebody has an ethics problem. That is not true for the Supreme Court. There's no inbox for the ethics complaint. There's no process for considering the ethics complaint. There's no public result that ever comes of it. And the Thomas situation made a sharp point on this, because what was put out there was that he didn't need to recuse himself in a particular case that potentially involved his wife, because he had no idea what she was up to with her insurrection activities. What he knew and when he knew it is a factual proposition that, as you well know, lends itself to investigation. Somebody should have gone and asked Clarence Thomas, what did you know and when did you know it about your wife's activities? Take a little statement down, and if he says nothing, then maybe that's the end of it. But then at least you've got the record of the conversation, so that if it proves that he was lying, you now have a record of that. And that's an incredibly important, as you so well know, Tim, investigative step If somebody thinks that they're just going to talk to you and the whole conversation is going to disappear, it's a different conversation than if you're writing it down and there's a record so that a false statement or perjury case could come up later. It's investigative conduct 101, and the Supreme Court didn't even meet that standard.
So we don't have much time left. We have to talk a little about politics. I'll make these real quick and rapid fire. You're running for re-election next year, right?
As I said last time.
When do you think you'll kick off your campaign?
Oh, I don't know, in some glorious way, but, fairly soon.
Glorious
I'll
way.
be the judge of that in my column, sir. And then the president. Do you want Joe Biden to run again next year?
Right.
I think that Joe has really shown himself very well. I thought that the State of the Union was strong. What he's gotten Congress to do is very strong.
Okay.
The signal to that is that nobody else is standing up against him.
What does Sheldon
I
Whitehouse
want him to
think?
run.
Okay. And what do you say to all the Democrats who think he's too old? 20 seconds.
Give it a shot. Look at what he's done. Look at what he's done. Or vote for somebody better, but identify that person first. Otherwise, get behind President Biden.
And he's got your vote, it sounds like.
I expect very much that I will be enthusiastically supporting a Biden re-election.
U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, good to see you.
Good
Thanks
to be
for
with you,
joining
Tim.
us.
Thank you, Ted.
For
Good
Ted
to be with
DC,
you.
I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.